Quarterback controversies are nothing new in the NFL. They happen every season, every training camp, and every preseason. But every once in a while, a simple sentence sends shockwaves through an entire franchise, and that's exactly what happened in Cleveland. One player, quiet for months, suddenly broke his silence. A man who had been written off as an afterthought, buried on the depth chart, came forward and declared, "I've been ready for QB1." 5 words. That's all it took to set the Browns' facility on fire. Because in most situations, those words would be dismissed as confidence. Just the kind of competitive spirit you'd expect from a professional athlete. But in Cleveland, with their history, with their track record of quarterback drama stretching back decades, those 5 words meant something entirely different. This wasn't confidence. This was confrontation. This wasn't an athlete simply saying he's prepared. This was a quarterback drawing a line in the sand, publicly daring the coaching staff, the front office, and the entire organization to question their decision-making. And the timing couldn't have been more volatile. The Browns are already stumbling through a messy preseason, losses piling up, critics hammering head coach Kevin Stefanski for game management, and an ownership group known more for dysfunction than stability. Into that storm steps Dillon Gabriel, a recent draft pick, a quarterback many believed would spend the year quietly developing. Instead, he grabbed the microphone and challenged the entire structure of the Browns' quarterback hierarchy. And here, where things get even more complicated, Gabriel's declaration doesn't exist in a vacuum. The Browns already have another young quarterback stealing headlines, Shedeur Sanders, the son of Coach Prime, a 5th-round pick who has captured the imagination of fans, electrified practices, and turned preseason games into must-watch television. So when Gabriel says he's ready for QB1, he isn't just declaring his own readiness. He's declaring war on the very idea that Sanders is the future of this franchise. That's why this moment feels so explosive, because it's no longer about competition on the field, it's about power inside the building. It's about how ownership reacts, how the locker room divides, and how the fan base chooses sides. Dillon Gabriel's words were more than just a statement. They were a challenge to Sanders, to Stefanski, to the front office, and even to Jimmy Haslam himself. They forced the Browns to answer a question they've been dodging all offseason. Who is really the future of this team? And here's the truth. This battle isn't just about talent. It's about politics, reputation, money, and legacy. Gabriel has the resume, the polish, the technical skill. Sanders has the charisma, the star power, and the momentum. One says he's ready. The other proves it every day. So buckle in, because this story is bigger than 2 quarterbacks fighting for a job. This is the latest chapter in Cleveland's never-ending saga of dysfunction, a story of confidence, controversy, and the one statement that might just change everything. For months, Dillon Gabriel kept his head down. He was the new guy, an Oklahoma transfer, a mid-round draft pick expected to bide his time, learn the system, and maybe fight for scraps of playing time somewhere down the line. On paper, his role seemed clear. Develop quietly, say the right things, and let the coaches dictate his future. And for a while, that's exactly what he did. He was professional, silent, and patient, until suddenly he was. Because Gabriel finally snapped. During a routine media session, he dropped the sentence that changed everything. "I've been ready for QB1." Just 5 words, but the delivery carried the weight of a bomb going off inside the Browns' facility. To the casual fan, it might have sounded like harmless confidence. What quarterback doesn't believe he's capable of starting? But those closest to the team understood immediately this wasn't confidence. It was a declaration. It was defiance. It was Gabriel telling everyone in the building that he'd had enough of waiting. And the timing, absolutely brutal. The Browns were already under siege from every angle. A string of preseason losses had exposed glaring flaws. Kevin Stefanski's play calling was under the microscope again. Rumors of ownership frustration were swirling through the facility. The last thing Cleveland needed was another quarterback controversy. Yet here was Gabriel, willingly igniting one. For months, he had been disciplined about staying quiet. After the suspension fiasco, after the endless speculation about the depth chart, Gabriel's camp had reportedly told him, "Play it safe. Let your work speak for itself. Don't make noise. Don't add fuel to the fire." But patience has limits, and Gabriel had reached his. He was tired of standing in the shadows, tired of watching Shedeur Sanders dominate the narrative, tired of waiting for coaches to eventually recognize his efforts. So instead of waiting, he forced the issue. He went public, knowing full well the consequences. Here's the kicker. Gabriel didn't make that statement in isolation. He made it against the backdrop of a franchise drowning in dysfunction. The Browns' facility was already buzzing with tension, with whispers of locker room frustration and coaching indecision. So when Gabriel stood up and said, "I'm ready," it wasn't just about his own career. It was about organizational authority, about who truly controls the quarterback room, and about how much chaos this team could withstand before it imploded. The reaction inside the building was immediate. Coaches, teammates, and even front office members knew there was no walking this back. Gabriel had forced their hand. If they ignored him, it looked weak. If they backed him, it looked like betrayal of Sanders. And if they disciplined him, it risked alienating a talented young quarterback who clearly wasn't going to sit quietly anymore. This was no longer about depth charts or preseason reps. Gabriel's silence was over, and with 5 words, he'd turned a quarterback competition into a full-scale organizational crisis. At first glance, Dillon Gabriel's statement, "I've been ready for QB1, felt like a simple declaration of confidence. But beneath the surface, those 5 words carried layers of meaning that insiders and fans quickly began dissecting. Because Gabriel wasn't just talking about himself. He was indirectly challenging the entire power structure inside Cleveland's locker room. To understand the weight of what he said, you have to look at the timing. Gabriel didn't make that comment after a strong preseason win. He didn't say it when the media was hyping him up or when the team had momentum. He said it at a moment when Cleveland was spiraling. The Browns were desperate for stability, desperate for someone to take control. And here was Gabriel stepping up and essentially saying, "Why not me?" But the hidden message went deeper. When Gabriel said he was ready, he wasn't just claiming he had the physical tools. He was hinting that he'd already proven himself in ways the coaches weren't acknowledging. It was his way of pointing at the hours of practice reps, the late-night studying film, the quiet leadership in the locker room, all the things that don't show up on highlight reels. He wasn't just ready in talent, he was ready in preparation. That subtle pushback raised a bigger question. Why hadn't he been given the chance yet? By saying what he did, Gabriel was indirectly putting pressure on the coaching staff. He was telling fans, the media, and even ownership, if I'm ready and they're not letting me play, then maybe the problem isn't me. And for a team already battling whispers of dysfunction, that was explosive. Reports had already suggested the Browns were split internally over Shedeur Sanders' rapid promotion. Some coaches believed in his star power and raw ability, while others felt he wasn't ready to lead an NFL huddle. Gabriel's words poured gasoline on that debate. Another layer of meaning? Respect. In a league where rookies are often expected to wait their turn, Gabriel was rejecting that hierarchy. He was demanding to be treated like more than a backup, more than a placeholder. It wasn't arrogance, it was defiance. It was him telling the franchise, "I've earned this, whether you acknowledge it or not." And perhaps the most overlooked piece of his statement was what it signaled to his teammates. Players notice everything: who shows up early, who works through injury, who commands the room. By publicly declaring himself ready, Gabriel wasn't just talking to the cameras. He was sending a message to the locker room: "I'm willing to lead if you're willing to follow." That's the kind of statement that can quietly shift loyalty, especially if frustration with the coaching staff is already bubbling. So while the media played his quote as a confident sunbutt, the reality was far heavier. It wasn't just confidence, it was a challenge, a protest, and a warning all at once. Gabriel wasn't only speaking for himself, he was exposing the cracks inside the Browns' foundation. And as the weeks went on, those cracks only got wider. If Dillon Gabriel's 5 words stirred the pot, Shedeur Sanders' presence on the field poured cement over the Browns' decision-making. Because no matter how you feel about the politics behind the scenes, there's one thing nobody could deny: Shedeur was a force of nature. His rise wasn't just hype, it was domination in real time. From the moment he stepped into training camp, Sanders carried himself with the aura of someone who knew the spotlight belonged to him. The cameras followed him everywhere, teammates whispered about his confidence, and fans flooded social media with clips of his sharp throws and highlight moments. He wasn't just another rookie fighting for reps, he looked like a franchise centerpiece in the making. And the numbers, they spoke for themselves. In scrimmages, Shedeur's timing with receivers was crisp. His accuracy on short and mid-range throws made the offense look smoother, faster, and more dangerous. Even veteran defenders quietly admitted, "He's already seeing the field better than some vets." That kind of respect doesn't come easy, but Shedeur earned it. But what really set him apart wasn't just the skill, it was the swagger. He had the kind of presence that made the locker room pay attention. When Shedeur walked into a huddle, the energy shifted. Players leaned in, eyes locked on him. It was the unspoken acknowledgement that he wasn't just the future, he was the now. And in a league where leadership often matters as much as arm strength, that charisma was invaluable. Still, dominance has a price. Every snap Shedeur took meant Gabriel fell further into the shadows. Every touchdown throw widened the gap in perception between potential starter and permanent backup. And the front office noticed. Rumors swirled that ownership wanted Shedeur to be the face of the franchise. His college legacy, his family name, and his highlight reel style were simply too marketable to ignore. That marketing power added another layer to his dominance. Fans weren't just supporting him, they were demanding him. Jerseys sold out. Social clips went viral. Suddenly, the Browns' fun bus wasn't debating who should start. They were celebrating Shedeur like he was already a star. For a franchise desperate to win back its reputation, that kind of fan energy was priceless. Yet behind the highlight reels, cracks in the narrative began to form. Some teammates privately wondered if the hype was moving faster than the reality. Yes, Shedeur was electric, but he was also young. Mistakes happened, reads were missed, timing sometimes broke down, and pressure occasionally rattled him. But the Browns weren't treating him like a rookie with flaws. They were treating him like a savior, and that put the spotlight squarely on his shoulders. For Dillon Gabriel, this dominance was both inspiring and crushing. Inspiring because he saw what a young quarterback could achieve when given the chance. Crushing because he realized the Browns weren't just choosing talent, they were choosing a narrative, a brand, a star. Shedeur Sanders wasn't just dominating the field. He was dominating the entire direction of the franchise. Shedeur's dominance may have thrilled fans, but inside the Browns building, it set off a storm no one could contain. The franchise wanted unity, a clear direction, a quarterback room pulling the same way. Instead, what they got was fractures, quiet at first, but widening with every passing week. Behind closed doors, coaches began to split into camps. Some were convinced Shedeur Sanders had to be the starter, no matter how steep the learning curve. They argued his arm talent and leadership were already lifting the offense to a new level. Others, though, weren't sold. They saw the growing pains, the mistakes, and whispered that Gabriel's steadiness might be what the team really needed. What started as simple disagreements in film sessions soon turned into full-blown debates. The front office wasn't immune either. Ownership leaned heavily toward Shedeur, not only because of his potential but because of what he represented. He was marketable. He drew cameras, fans, and attention in a way Gabriel never could. For a franchise constantly fighting bad headlines, Shedeur's star power was irresistible. But that pressure trickled down to the staff, creating tension between what the front office wanted and what some coaches believed was best for the locker room. And then came the players. Football teams live and die by locker room chemistry, and that chemistry was starting to sour. Veterans who valued discipline and hierarchy questioned whether Shedeur was being fast-tracked unfairly. Others, especially younger players, loved the energy and spotlight he brought. For them, Sanders represented hope, a chance to be part of something bigger than another disappointing Browns season. The divide wasn't loud or public, but anyone paying attention could feel it. Meanwhile, Gabriel's bold words still hung in the air. He had drawn a line, and that forced everyone around him to quietly pick a side. Was he just a frustrated backup stirring controversy, or was he raising a fair point about how decisions were being made? The answer depended on who you asked. But one thing was certain, Gabriel wasn't just competing with Shedeur anymore. He was competing with the entire machine of the Browns organization. The fallout extended beyond practice fields. Media coverage latched onto the drama, running stories about a quarterback clash in Cleveland. Talk shows speculated daily about whether Gabriel's comment hinted at deeper dysfunction. Even fans were split, arguing online about whether Sanders had truly earned his spot or whether Gabriel deserved a real shot. The noise surrounding the team became deafening. Inside Burra, the tension grew heavy. Coaches knew that once a locker room starts to fracture, the season can unravel fast. A single bad loss could turn quiet frustrations into open rebellion. And for a franchise with a long history of chaos, the last thing they could afford was another implosion. But the truth was unavoidable. Gabriel's defiance, Shedeur's dominance, and ownership's meddling had created the perfect storm. The Browns weren't just fighting opponents on Sundays, they were fighting themselves every single day. And the next move would decide whether the team held together or tore apart completely. If there's one thing the NFL has mastered, it's turning on-field battles into off-field spectacles. And when Dillon Gabriel's bold declaration collided with Shedeur Sanders' rising dominance, the media machine went into overdrive. Overnight, Cleveland wasn't just another struggling franchise, it was the center of a storm that everyone wanted a piece of. Sports talk shows lit up first. Pundits dissected Gabriel's words frame by frame like they were Zuprudk film. One camp called him gutsy, a young quarterback refusing to let the spotlight pass him by. The other called him reckless, suggesting his statement was a selfish distraction for a team already teetering on the edge. Every morning debate show seemed to dedicate a segment to the Browns' QB controversy, and clips of Gabriel and Sanders dominated highlight reels. But the fire really caught when fans got involved. Social media became a battlefield. Hashtags like Tum Shedeur and Ride with Gabriel started trending, turning Cleveland's quarterback competition into a national argument. Fans shared highlight reels, stats, and hot takes like their lives depended on it. Every misstep in practice was amplified. Every clip from training camp turned into proof for one side or ammunition for the other.
If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button.
And while the debates raged online, the Browns' PR team scrambled to contain the narrative. Coaches gave carefully worded answers, insisting both quarterbacks are progressing and competition is healthy. But the more they tried to play it safe, the more the media pounced. Silence was interpreted as weakness. Caution was spun as confusion. The organization couldn't win. Local media piled on, too. Cleveland talk radio fueled the fire daily, with callers passionately defending one quarterback while tearing down the other. Some saw Shedeur as the future face of the franchise, marketable, electrifying, and ready to lead. Others argued Gabriel had been overlooked and disrespected, his patience wasted while the Browns chased star power. For a fan base long starved of consistency, the divide was raw and emotional. What made it worse was how every narrative seemed to echo Cleveland's history. National outlets reminded fans of the franchise's endless quarterback carousel, draft busts, midseason benchings, false saviors. "Here we go again," headlines sneered, painting the Browns not as contenders but as drama magnets. For fans, it was exhausting. For ownership, it was humiliating. Yet behind the chaos, one undeniable fact emerged: controversy sells. Shedeur's jersey sales soared, Gabriel's name trended, and suddenly Browns' training camp footage was getting more views than playoff highlight reels. The team's dysfunction had become its brand, and the media wasn't about to let go. But here's the danger. Media storms have a way of becoming self-fulfilling. The louder the outside noise grew, the harder it became for players to tune it out. Practices weren't just practices anymore, they were auditions under the world's microscope. Mistakes weren't just corrected, they were broadcast and dissected. Every throw, every reaction, every quote carried more weight than it should. For Cleveland, the media and fan firestorm wasn't just background noise. It was fuel. And as it spread, it began to seep into the locker room itself, threatening to push a fragile team past the breaking point. For all the talk about swagger, leadership, and locker room politics, The NFL always comes back to one thing: numbers. Stats don't lie. They cut through the hype, the speculation, and the spin. And when you laid Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel's numbers side by side, the story got even more complicated. Let's start with Shedeur. On paper, he looked like the dream rookie. His preseason completion rate hovered around 68%, well above the league average for first-year quarterbacks. He wasn't just hitting easy checkdowns either. Nearly a third of his completions came on throws over 15 yards, showing off the kind of downfield confidence that had scouts drooling. In red zone situations, he looked unshakable, converting drives into touchdowns at a rate that had veterans nodding their heads in quiet respect. Then there was the mobility factor. Sanders extended plays with his legs, keeping defenses on edge. While he wasn't putting up Lamar Jackson-type rushing numbers, he consistently turned broken plays into first downs. That ability alone made him look like a player built for today's NFL. But here, where the numbers also revealed the cracks. Under pressure, Sanders' accuracy dipped sharply, with his completion percentage dropping to just 42% when defenders closed in. His sack rate was among the highest of any rookie in the preseason. For all his talent, he still showed flashes of inexperience, holding the ball too long, forcing throws into tight coverage, trusting his arm a little too much. Now compare that to Dillon Gabriel. His stats didn't pop off the screen in the same way, but they told a different story. Gabriel's preseason completion percentage sat at 64%, slightly lower than Shedeur's, but with a higher efficiency on quick reads and short throws. He excelled at moving the chains methodically, posting one of the best third-down conversion rates among backup quarterbacks in the league. Most importantly, Gabriel's turnover numbers were cleaner. While Shedeur threw multiple risky interceptions during camp scrimmages, Gabriel kept his mistakes to a minimum. His touchdown-to-interception ratio wasn't flashy, but it screamed reliability, the kind of consistency coaches crave when chaos hits on Sundays. The raw production painted the dilemma perfectly. Shedeur had the higher ceiling, the star flashes, the highlight throws that could win games in a heartbeat. Gabriel had the steadier hand, the discipline, and the safe decision-making that kept drives alive. In short, one was fireworks, the other was insurance. And for the Browns, those numbers became a silent battlefield. Coaches in Sanders' corner pointed to explosive plays and argued that you don't win in today's NFL without taking risks. Gabriel's supporters countered with the cold efficiency of his drives, saying a team built on defense and ball control needed someone who wouldn't hand games away. Fans and media twisted the stats into ammunition for whichever side they were on. Some called Shedeur's highlights proof that he was the guy. Others said Gabriel's steadiness proved he'd been overlooked. But at the end of the day, the numbers didn't resolve the debate, they sharpened it. Because the truth was undeniable. The Browns had two quarterbacks who could play. The question wasn't who could produce. It was who they were willing to build their future around. In football, battles aren't always won on the field. Often, they're waged in the shadows, through words, body language, and the invisible tug-of-war inside the locker room. What Dillon Gabriel did with his public declaration, "I've been ready for QB1," wasn't just a statement of confidence. It was a calculated strike in a game of mental warfare. And whether he realized it or not, he dragged Shedeur Sanders and the entire Cleveland Browns organization into a psychological brawl. Quarterback competitions have always been as much about perception as performance. Coaches say they only evaluate tape, but narratives matter. Who's the leader? Who commands the huddle? Who wins the room? Gabriel understood this. By going public, he tried to reframe the conversation, not about Sanders' talent, but about the Browns' supposed failure to see his own readiness. In doing so, he applied pressure on Stefanski and the front office, forcing them to defend why Sanders kept getting the Lions' share of reps. But here, the flip side, Sanders didn't flinch. If Gabriel was playing the mind game, Shedeur turned it into fuel. Teammates described him as sharper, louder, and more confident in practice immediately after Gabriel's remarks. His response wasn't through quotes to reporters, it was through execution. Every crisp pass, every touchdown drive was an answer to Gabriel's challenge without him ever saying a word. This psychological duel rippled through the roster. Veteran players understood what was happening. Some sided with Gabriel, quietly respecting his willingness to speak up. Others rallied harder behind Sanders, admiring his ability to rise above the noise. Every meeting, every practice became a subtle referendum on leadership, and that tension is what truly made this controversy dangerous. It wasn't just about who played better, it was about whose mindset set the tone for the entire locker room. Gabriel's camp knew he couldn't outshine Shedeur in raw highlight reel ability, so he leaned into experience, poise, and maturity. His weapon was suggestion, that maybe Sanders' hype was manufactured, that the Browns were blinded by star power. Sanders' counterattack was authenticity. He didn't need to claim readiness because everyone watching could see it. That's where mental warfare became brutal. Gabriel tried to plant doubt. Sanders erased it with action. And in the court of public perception, that contrast only made Gabriel's statement look more like desperation. The organization, meanwhile, was caught in the middle of this psychological storm. How do you reward the veteran's confidence without undermining the rookie's authority? How do you show fairness without losing credibility? Every move became symbolic. Every word from Stefanski or Andrew Barry was dissected for favoritism. Every rep allocation was proof, one way or the other, of hidden agendas. This was never just about numbers on a stat sheet. It was about pressure. Pressure on Gabriel to validate his own career. Pressure on Sanders to live up to his name. Pressure on the Browns to finally get this decision right. The mental warfare made every moment heavier, every practice feel like a playoff game. And in that war, one truth became clear. Shedeur Sanders thrived on it. Gabriel merely survived it. Beyond the stats, the locker room tension, and the media frenzy, the Browns' quarterback controversy sparked something equally compelling. Theories about what was really happening behind the scenes. Because when Gabriel went public and Sanders continued to dominate, insiders and fans alike started asking the same question. Was this just about quarterbacks, or was it about power? Some suggested that Gabriel's statement wasn't just frustration, it was strategy. By publicly declaring himself ready, he may have been testing the front office, probing for cracks, and attempting to force ownership or coaches to reconsider the depth chart. If you believe the whispers, every media appearance, every quote, and every social media post was part of a calculated attempt to shift organizational momentum in his favor. Others theorized a more subtle chess match was in play. Perhaps Stefanski privately supported Gabriel's technical mastery, but recognized the ownership's obsession with Sanders, potential, and star power. Could it be that the quarterback competition was a proxy battle, a safe outlet for unresolved tensions between coaches and executives? Every decision, every rep, every interview, every draft pick was scrutinized as if the Browns' entire hierarchy were competing for influence under the guise of football. There were even whispers about Andrew Barry's role. Drafting both quarterbacks had always been a risk, but some insiders wondered whether Barry preferred Gabriel as the safer developmental choice, while publicly promoting Sanders to appease fans, media, and ownership. Theories circulated that the team's brass might have been quietly supporting two opposing visions, leaving Stefanski to navigate impossible terrain while trying to maintain control of the locker room. And then came the narratives of deliberate escalation. Some believed Gabriel's declaration was timed precisely to create maximum disruption. With preseason losses piling up and organizational discipline already in question, every public word amplified tension. Analysts speculated that this wasn't mere impatience. It was pressure applied intentionally to test leadership, provoke a response, and perhaps even force a trade or contractual maneuver. Meanwhile, the media and fanbase amplified these theories endlessly. Every quote from Gabriel was framed as calculated, every highlight from Sanders interpreted as strategic messaging. Reddit threads, podcasts, and social media debates dissected body language, rep counts, and even sideline interactions, seeking proof of clandestine alignments or secret favors. In Cleveland, nothing was ever just football. It was a puzzle, and everyone wanted the key. What all these theories underscored was a harsh reality. The Browns were a team operating in chaos. A single public statement wasn't just a comment. It became evidence in a larger narrative about power, influence, and control. Gabriel's defiance, Sanders' rise, and ownership's involvement were more than football. They were signals in a complex hierarchy, a mental and organizational battleground where every decision had amplified consequences. Theories aside, one thing remained clear. This wasn't simply a quarterback controversy. It was a reflection of a franchise wrestling with identity, control, and direction. And until the Browns decisively chose which reality to endorse, the speculation, tension, and power struggles were destined to continue. What began as a simple quarterback battle quickly escalated into something far bigger, a full-blown cultural phenomenon. Dillon Gabriel's bold declaration and Shedeur Sanders' rising dominance didn't just affect the Browns. They captured the attention of the entire NFL world, transforming a team's internal struggle into a story with national significance. Social media amplified every moment. Clips of Sanders' pinpoint throws went viral within hours, while Gabriel's comments were dissected endlessly by fans, analysts, and influencers alike. Every fan base seemed to have an opinion, turning a local issue into a nationwide debate. Hashtags trended globally. Memes proliferated, framing Gabriel as the frustrated underdog and Sanders as the inevitable superstar. The drama transcended the field. It became entertainment, a narrative people followed religiously. Podcasts and YouTube channels turned the Browns' quarterback saga into weekly episodic content. Analysts replayed practice footage frame by frame, debating body language, cadence, and sideline interactions. Every practice, every interview, every subtle gesture became fuel for commentary. Even casual fans, who might never have followed preseason games, were now invested. For a franchise long accustomed to mediocrity, the sheer level of engagement was unprecedented. Television coverage intensified the effect. National networks highlighted Sanders' electrifying plays, contrasting them with Gabriel's calculated preparation. Analysts debated who truly deserved the starting role, dissecting every stat, every throw, and every decision. The Browns, previously ignored outside their fan base, became a must-watch team for anyone following football drama. Cleveland's quarterback controversy had officially become water cooler conversation, dominating headlines and social feeds alike. The phenomenon wasn't just about media attention. It influenced players and staff internally. Teammates felt the weight of national scrutiny with every snap. Coaches had to navigate not only performance metrics, but also the narrative shaping public perception. Organizational decisions carried amplified stakes because every choice would be analyzed, criticized, and broadcast. The team's culture was no longer confined to the building. It existed in the court of public opinion, creating pressure unlike any typical preseason environment. Moreover, the Browns' saga became symbolic of broader themes in sports. It highlighted how star power, media influence, and public perception often rival raw talent and technical skill in determining opportunity. Gabriel's technical proficiency was respected, yet Sanders' charisma, performance, and marketability reshaped expectations of leadership. Fans weren't just cheering for plays. They were participating in a story of ambition, defiance, and emergence, where identity, reputation, and narrative mattered as much as touchdowns. Ultimately, the Browns' quarterback drama wasn't merely a sports story. It was a cultural lens. It reflected how professional football operates at the intersection of performance, personality, and public scrutiny. Gabriel's words, Sanders' dominance, and the organization's decisions became part of a larger narrative that captivated audiences far beyond Cleveland. In the end, this phenomenon proved one thing: football is more than numbers and wins. It's about stories, conflicts, and characters. And for a brief moment, the Browns weren't just a team. They were the center of a national spectacle, where every pass, every quote, and every decision became part of a drama that no one could ignore. The Cleveland Browns now stand at a critical crossroads, where every choice carries consequences far beyond a single season. Dillon Gabriel's public declaration and Shedeur Sanders' undeniable dominance have exposed more than just a quarterback competition. They've revealed the inner workings, vulnerabilities, and culture of an entire organization. Fans, analysts, and players alike are watching closely, each with their own expectations and judgments. At this juncture, the franchise faces a defining moment. Will they decisively back Sanders, the young phenom whose performance already speaks louder than words, and establish clarity in the locker room? Or will they allow Gabriel's challenge to extend the competition, risking further disruption and prolonging a saga that has already captured national attention? Each path has high stakes. A firm decision could restore faith, foster stability, and build momentum for the season. Indecision, however, risks compounding frustration, eroding trust, and undermining the credibility of leadership at every level. Beyond internal consequences, this crossroads affects the Browns' reputation across the league. Free agents, draft prospects, and coaching candidates all observe closely how the organization navigates conflict, manages talent, and maintains discipline. Every move signals to the wider NFL community whether Cleveland is a team capable of building a championship culture or trapped in historical patterns of dysfunction. At its core, this isn't just about quarterbacks. It's about vision, authority, and culture. Sanders proves through performance that potential and preparation can shape reality. Gabriel reminds the organization that ambition and voice cannot be ignored. The balance between these forces will define not only the team's immediate success, but the trajectory of leadership, development, and long-term strategy. The clock is ticking. Training camp is winding down. Regular season games are imminent. Every rep, every meeting, and every decision now carries amplified weight. The Browns must choose which reality to endorse, whose path to support, and which message to send to players, fans, and the league. This is more than a quarterback controversy. It's a referendum on organizational identity, a test of leadership, and a defining moment for Cleveland's future. Gabriel has spoken, Sanders has proven, and the Browns must finally decide which reality they will embrace before the season and history renders the verdict.
If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.